battered to death. It looked like there'd maybe been a burglary.
The house had been ransacked.
The fact that this has happened in broad daylight, at a time when people are taking their children to school, it strikes fear throughout everybody.
A lot of people are scared living around here.
You just can't believe that it's happened.
The big fear is that our community is then under threat.
In the heart of the East Midlands lies historic Lincoln.
It's just got a wonderful, timeless feeling to it, Lincoln. We are a place of great historical interest. We got everything: castles, cathedrals. There's a great many medieval churches, and there's a great waterway in the centre as well, the Brayford, established by the Romans. So we are a good tourist destination. And people like the fact we're not overly commercialised. We just think it's a wonderful, vibrant place.
And in recent years, Lincoln has become increasingly popular with overseas students.
The university, which is a huge university and, well, pretty much world famous, they've got colleges as well. Well, there are a lot of students, and a lot of the students are foreign nationals, many from the East Asian area. There is a nice mix.
To the south of Lincoln, on the River Witham, lies the suburb of Sincil Bank.
Sincil Bank area of Lincoln is a very tight-knit community, being adopted by the students and working-class Lincoln folk. A stone's throw away from the football ground. It does have a very villagey feel. You will see children playing football in the street.
The Sincil Bank community is very diverse. I've been a resident my whole life, and we have a lot of people that are from different ethnic backgrounds. And because we're so close to the university and stuff, we do get a lot of uni students coming to live down here, especially now that the university is getting more popular. We also have a lot of elderly people, but we always try and find a way to build that community together. It's more like a village. People are always supportive of each other.
It's just a nice, friendly place. Everybody knows everybody on the street and everybody chats with everybody. All the kids play out together. It's got a proper community vibe.
It's very close to the South Common, which is the major green area in the south of Lincoln.
You know, there's a lovely park there where people go and walk their dogs and can go and sit. So you have got the nice, idyllic, peaceful park only a short distance away.
But the peace is shattered on one summer's day. At 12:20 p.m, police are called to an address in Sincil Bank.
When police arrived at the scene, they found a body of a woman that had been badly beaten. She had appeared to have been beaten with a blunt object.
The crime scene is secured.
The police came, they cornered off the streets, you weren't allowed anywhere near your houses and stuff. No one really told us what happened.
A murder investigation is immediately launched, and it's not long before the body is identified as 29-year-old student Mingzi Yang. But who is Mingzi, and how had she become a victim of such a brutal murder?
Mingzi Yang was originally from China. She came to the UK in 2008, and she was studying English at Lincoln College. Initially, she lived in the Humberside area, and in 2012, she moved to the address in Sincil Bank, where she lived with her partner, who she'd met fairly recently, Darren Grundy, and her young 5-year-old son.
Mingzi's son was from a previous relationship, but Darren quickly became part of the family.
As a couple, they were engaged to be married and were due to get married the following year.
But on the 17th of June, Darren had grown increasingly worried throughout the day when Mingzi failed to answer her phone.
He'd gone to work and he'd been trying to get hold of her throughout the day without any success, so he left work early and made his way to the address.
Darren arrives home and makes a shocking discovery.
He found a scene of devastation, really. It looked like it had been ransacked. It looked like there'd maybe been a burglary. There was a lot of blood in the address, and he discovered Mingzi's body.
And then he raised the alarm and the police were contacted.
As the police begin their investigation, they need to establish what Mingzi's last known movements were on the day of her murder.
Detectives will use a phrase sometimes that says if you find out how a person lived, then you'll find out how they died. It's about building up a detailed picture of that victim, because somewhere in there might just be the answer as to why this has happened and who's committed it. On the morning of the 17th of June, she'd gone and took her young son to the local primary school, which was a very short walk away, and returned to the address.
The killing was believed to have taken place in broad daylight, early in the morning after school, although the body wasn't discovered until Mr. Grundy raised the alarm.
The question is, who could possibly have wanted to harm Mingzi?
First thing that would go through my head is to try and establish exactly what has gone on.
The initial mystery for the police was that the house had been ransacked. There had been a burglary, and that possibly an intruder had killed Mingzi Yang.
News that a possible burglary has turned into a murder sends shockwaves across the local community.
There was fear and a sense of shock, because it's not something that happens with frequency in Lincoln at all. And the big fear is that our community is then under threat.
I remember hearing about it. My mum and my dad told me about it, and it was very upsetting. It's very traumatic knowing that it's basically on your front door. You know, you could go to sleep at night and something bad could happen. This could have been my mum, or this could have been my sister, or this could have been a relative that lives across the road.
Everybody was massively scared of what had happened because it was so close to home. It's 2 minutes away from the pub that I run. So that day, customers were coming in absolutely shocked and stunned with all the police cordons. It just is unheard of around here. You just can't believe that it's happened.
There was a genuine fear from people who lived in the local area that a burglar or intruder was at large and had carried out such a devastating crime in broad daylight. Neighbours were obviously concerned that this could possibly happen to them.
Of 29-year-old mum, Mingzi Yang, who has been beaten to death in her own home in what looks like a robbery gone wrong.
She was a local student. She'd got a child. We just couldn't believe that somebody like her had been killed.
And the fear on the streets is growing.
A lot of people are scared of living around here, knowing that something really bad's happened, and it's on your front door.
The first feeling is one of shock, and then wanting to know really what had happened. Was the public at risk?
When something like this happens in the community, there's a massive impact. There's lots of children and families in this area, so to have something so tragic and awful happening on your doorstep, it strikes fear throughout everybody.
That's all we were talking about. Everybody was just in utter disbelief that something like that could happen so close to home.
And a lot of them will have been friendly with Mingzi Yang in any event, so apart from the personal impact, you really do get a build-up of tension throughout the community. People feel understandably frightened. Who's committed it? Why have they committed it? Are they going to come back and do it again? If it is a burglary, is our house going to be the next target?
With such a brutal murder happening on a busy street, police are taken aback at the boldness of the crime.
Mingzi had a young son who had been dropped off at school, and the killing was believed to have taken place sometime between about 9 and 10 a.m.
The fact that this has happened in broad daylight, at a time when people are taking their children to school, in a place like this, which appears quite peaceful and tranquil, is actually quite shocking.
The idea that an intruder had managed to get into this house unnoticed and carry out this killing was obviously very frightening for local people.
With the attack suspected to have occurred early in the day, police reach out to the locals for any potential information that may lead them to Mingzi's attacker.
You're really looking for witnesses. Something that's happened like that with so many injuries and so much devastation within the house would presumably have made some noise. You know, had she been screaming and shouting for help? Have the neighbours heard or seen anything?
In a case like this, in an area like this, the community are absolutely vital. They are the eyes and ears, and they're going to know things and see things that the police will never get to find out about. So it's really important to get out in amongst the community, make yourself visible and ask those important questions, because just by being here, you may be approached by a member of the public who tells you something that in isolation might seem quite minor, but actually when you put it together as part of a jigsaw puzzle, it could actually help to solve the case.
Local reporter Richard Van Plu is also on the scene.
The first time I became aware of Mingzi's death was when the police put out a press release saying that the body of a woman had been found. Killings like this, obviously in rural areas, don't happen every day, and people are quite rightly shocked. And sometimes when you arrive at the scene, people will talk to you. It's their main way of dealing with what's happened.
But so far, door-to-door inquiries have uncovered no leads to Mingzi's attacker. With the fear in the area growing, forensics arrived to examine the scene.
When I arrived at the scene, it was a shocking sight. Mingzi was face upwards and she was covered in blood. She was in the main living room. There was large, pooled, smeared blood staining on the carpet all around Mingzi's body. There was a white radiator near where Mingzi's body was found, and there was spots of blood spattered onto the white radiator. The smears and pools of blood along the carpet had indicated to me that she'd been assaulted at one end of the room, and she was on the floor crawling towards the kitchen in an attempt to escape. The blood spatters on the radiator and on the adjacent wall indicated that as she was crawling along, she was being hit with a blunt instrument repeatedly.
Post-mortem results then arrive, which further adds to the horrific nature of Mingzi's death.
A post-mortem found Mingzi's injuries were quite severe.
She had numerous injuries, more than 20 in total, mainly to her head. She also had, interestingly enough, some defence wounds, including a fracture to one of her hands, which clearly indicated that she'd been trying to fend the attacker off. But the actual number of injuries and the nature of those injuries were very, very severe and would only ever have resulted in one thing, which was her death. She'd basically been battered to death.
But as police scour the scene and surrounding areas, there is no sign of the murder weapon.
The weapon used was believed to be a very hard, heavy, blunt object. But interestingly enough, it wasn't recovered from the scene, which suggests that potentially the offender may have possibly brought it with them, but certainly taken it away with them, which does suggest a degree of premeditation and planning and the realisation, even in the moment of everything happening, that actually they might have left some evidence on that weapon.
Police start to suspect that their initial theory, that Mingzi disturbed a burglar who then attacked her, could be wrong. This is reinforced when detectives examine Mingzi's possessions.
Burglary is normally where somebody goes in and steals something. Sounds fairly obvious, but that's what happens. So if there were items in that house, such as TVs, electrical goods, jewellery, cash, you would expect someone that's committing a burglary to take those. The fact that items didn't appear to be missing is really important.
And new forensic evidence casts further doubt that Mingzi disturbed a burglary taking place.
The perpetrator had gone upstairs and opened a number of drawers, which made it look like a burglary. However, the intruder had done this after he'd assaulted Mingzi. We know that because Mingzi's blood was on the stairs in the form of footwear marks, and her blood was on the drawers in the form of finger marks, glove marks in blood. In my mind, your average burglar, if they're startled, they're just going to want to get out the property. They don't want to harm anybody. They just don't want to get caught. Why would a perpetrator repeatedly beat Mingzi and then take the risk of going upstairs to see if they could find something in her bedroom? It just didn't quite add up.
By re-examining the post-mortem results, police suspect this attack may actually have been carried out by someone closer to home.
The nature and the number of injuries and the fact that they were all caused to Minxie's head area is a suggestion that perhaps this is a little bit more personal. It's almost like a humiliation and perhaps not just a stranger attack or a burglar that's been disturbed.
Considering the nature of Mingxie's injuries, the police would have to consider whether this was an argument that had gone wrong.
In the majority of murder cases, there is some kind of connection between the victim and the offender.
90% of murders are committed by people who know the victim, and normally very closely.
As police begin to suspect that Mingxie could have known her attacker and that whoever it was had a grudge against her, they look to her previous relationships, beginning with her ex-husband, 33-year-old Wai Hong Sang.
Police contacted Mr. Sang. He lived in the Grimsby area. He was a chemistry graduate with dual nationality, so he was a Brit as well as Chinese. He had gone through a recent divorce with Mingxie, and they shared a son together.
Police want to know where Sang was on the day his ex-wife was murdered.
Mr. Sang was asked to provide a written statement of his movements on the 17th. He disclosed to police that he had taken the day off work.
Sang's statement explains why he took the day off and outlines a clear alibi for the time Mingxie was murdered.
He had the day off work and he went to Sherwood Pines in the Nottingham area where he went trail biking.
And he could provide car parking tickets and receipts to back this up.
With a solid alibi and evidence to prove it, Sang is discounted from the inquiries. So police shift their focus elsewhere, and to one person in particular.
The police, they would be examining who Mingxie had spoken to, who were the last people that had seen her. Obviously, in this case, Darren Grundy was virtually living at Mingxie Yang's address.
Darren Grundy would likely to have been the last person to see Mingxie Yang alive. He's the person who's in a current relationship with her. He's the person who discovered the body.
Mingxie Yang's fiancé, Darren Grundy, is taken in for questioning. And it isn't long before the police make an announcement.
Darren Grundy is arrested on suspicion of the murder of Mingxie Yang. He's taken into police custody, and the police think that they have their man.
All of Darren's clothing was seized and submitted to the laboratory for examination.
The police were convinced it obviously had the hallmarks of a crime of passion.
Yang was discovered at her home in the Lincoln suburb of Sincil Bank. And police have arrested her fiancé, 32-year-old Darren Grundy, on suspicion of murder.
Darren Grundy was the person that reported her death and was also possibly the last person to see her alive.
He was taken into police custody, during which time he's questioned and the police seek to gather further evidence and information to strengthen their case.
Police believe the attack on Mingxie was carried out by someone who knew her.
Police were convinced that this was a crime of passion. It's not unusual with crimes of passion that the victim is badly beaten. Mingxie had been beaten and sustained over 20 injuries.
The hallmarks of a crime of passion, I would say, are extreme violence, humiliation, degradation, that sort of thing. Doing something that's really personal, so, you know, destroying something that really means a lot to somebody. And often it is extreme, gratuitous violence where there's clearly been some kind of loss of self-control because it's such a personal issue.
Now in police custody, Darren faces intense questioning from detectives.
The interview of a murder suspect is different from the interview of a witness. It's far more detailed. The officers that interview a murder suspect will be specially trained, and they use tactics and techniques with the intention of getting as much information as possible. During the interviews, Darren Grundy maintains that he went to work that day and he was trying to get hold of Mingxie Yang during the day, couldn't get hold of her, So he decided to leave work early, and he came home from work early, and he found her dead in the home.
But police aren't convinced by his account and detain him further.
In order to hold someone in custody for more than 36 hours, the police need to go to a magistrate's court in order to keep that person in custody. So this is a serious situation for Darren Grundy. He's in custody, and obviously the police think that they have their man.
When police receive forensic results from Darren Grundy's clothing, the findings change the course of the investigation.
When we looked at Darren's clothing in the laboratory, there was no blood spattering on there. The blood staining on him was quite minimal, and it's not what I would expect from the perpetrator. I would expect to find a lot of small spots of blood on the perpetrator's clothing, especially around his lower legs. If you imagine when Mingsy's moving around the room and she's being constantly struck, the blood is spattering onto that radiator. Those small spots of blood will also spatter back onto the assailant. Didn't see anything like that at all on Darren's clothing.
But then a member of the public comes forward with some information that turns the case on its head.
The Sincilbank area of Lincoln is a very tight-knit community, and following the news of Mingsy's death, the teenage boy who was in the Sincilbank area on the morning of Mingsy's murder did come forward. He reported to police that he had seen a cyclist loitering very closely to the back passage of Mingsy's address.
The young boy saw a man on the pedal cycle cycling around this area, and he actually saw him go into an alleyway, which is where the address in question is.
He remembered clearly that cyclist was wearing a blue workman's helmet rather than a cycling helmet. He made eye contact with the cyclist and then watched as he wheeled that bike into Mingsy's passageway.
But who was the cyclist? And could they be responsible for Mingsy's murder? The physical description the boy gives narrows down his identity.
This key witness reported to police the cyclist was also of East Asian appearance. The police now had to explore people who knew Mingsy matching that description.
And at this point, the police become aware that actually they've been looking at the wrong man. And they focus their inquiries in a different direction.
Darren Grundy is released without charge. And attention now falls on an individual from Mingsy's past.
The description of the cyclist matched Mingsy's ex-husband, Mr. Sang.
Wai Hong Sang had already provided police with a convincing alibi, saying he was over 40 miles from Mingsy's home on the day of her murder, enjoying a day out biking at Sherwood Pines Forest.
Mr. Sang has a solid alibi. He'd travelled to Sherwood Pines, where he had spent the day trail biking. So police are then tasked with establishing his movements exactly and whether it is possible that this cyclist could be Mr. Sang. In the eyes of the investigation, there is obviously a big difference between police suspecting that this cyclist may be Mr. Sang and may have committed the murder, but proving it to a jury is obviously a whole different matter.
In an attempt to track down the mysterious individual spotted by a local teenager, police trawl through thousands of hours of CCTV from across Lincoln.
There are so many CCTV cameras now, private, local authority. People have them on their houses as well. It's a real critical part of any murder investigation. The police will be looking at trying to find that person at that location or as close as possible, and then trying to find where they went from there. Where did the cyclist come from? Ideally, what did they do whilst they were in the area, and then where did they go afterwards?
And after hours of rigorous detective work, police finally spot the cyclist.
What it actually showed was that This particular cyclist, who was quite distinctive in description, particularly with a hat that he was wearing, was picked up on 40 separate occasions in 16 different locations in and around the Lincoln City area. The route of the cyclist was quite clear from the footage that he'd come into the city in the early hours of the morning, then made his way out of the city again.
The man is seen cycling away from Lincoln just after 9 a.m, around 3 hours before Mingzi's body was discovered. Detectives analyse the footage to see if the cyclist in question is indeed Mingzi's ex-husband, Wai Hong Sang.
One of the main difficulties in proving identity of someone on CCTV is the quality of the footage. It's vastly improved since many years ago when it was really poor, but you still do have systems now, for one reason or another, that are not particularly clear. They're grainy. You may struggle to identify someone.
With the identity of the cyclist still unclear from the CCTV footage, police bring Sang in for questioning.
The police will be looking at his background, his movements and his relationship, trying to gather as much information. They'll be looking at inconsistencies with his account, and it may be that he can't give certain information. So they'll be trying to build up a case against him using the factual information that they know and anything which can either confirm or disprove his account.
Under caution, Sang gives the same account he provided in his written statement.
Wei Sang told the police that he had gone to Sherwood Pines in Nottingham. He'd driven straight there from his home address in Grimsby, and he'd been there for the duration of the day. He was also able to produce some receipts from parking in the Nottingham area and a petrol receipt as well.
Despite Sang providing receipts to prove his alibi, police attempt to investigate his digital footprint by looking into his phone activity on the day.
He had turned his phone off when he left home, which he said was the usual thing that he would do when he was going trail biking.
So what the police decided to do instead was to examine the sat-nav on his car.
And what officers discover reveals a major hole in Sang's story.
The inbuilt car sat-nav actually showed that he hadn't gone directly from Grimsby to Nottingham, but he'd driven from Grimsby to Lincoln, where he'd parked in a lay-by for at least 2 hours, and then afterwards had then gone to Nottingham. So there was a huge hole in the alibi.
It's a shocking revelation. Police now know Sang was parked up in a lay-by on the outskirts of Lincoln on the day of Mingzi's murder. Could it be that Sang had cycled from this location to Mingzi's home in Sinsel Bank? Police look again at the CCTV of the suspicious cyclist.
The analysis of the cyclist and the CCTV showed quite clearly with the times involved that he would have had the opportunity to have parked his vehicle on the outskirts of Lincoln, cycled into Lincoln to Mingzi's address, killed Mingzi, and then cycled back out of the city again, back to his car, and then driven to Sherwood Pines in Nottingham, where he claimed that he'd been all day.
This key CCTV evidence proved Mr. Sang did have the time available to cycle into Lincoln and murder his ex-wife.
But the CCTV footage is still unable to prove if Wai Hong Sang was at Mingzi's home on the day of the murder. The only evidence police have is circumstantial and unlikely to hold up in court. But then, forensic results from a search at Sang's address return from the lab.
The police submit various items for forensic examination from Wai Sang. There were items which were actually purchased after he'd separated from Mingzi Yan.
We examined a number of items from him, including a watch. The watch, when you looked at it with a naked eye, it didn't look as though there was anything on it at all. So I think the watch had probably been cleaned. But in the laboratory, once we could look at it, Using a low power microscope, we could manipulate the hinges, the links, and you could see that in between the links there were some small blood stains. Those samples of blood stains were then subject to DNA profiling tests, and the blood was attributable to Mingzi.
As well as the traces of Mingzi's blood found on her ex-husband's watch, further shocking evidence is found on a bicycle belonging to Sang.
The bike that we examined was a different bicycle from the bike in the CCTV, but it was in the car on the day. The initial visual examination of that bicycle, we couldn't find any blood. But once we got it in the laboratory with specialised lighting and the low power microscope, there was a small blood stain that was located on the handlebar. Again, that was subject to DNA profiling test, and that came back blood attributable to Mingzi. So from my examination of these objects, it was obvious that he has tried to cover all of his tracks, and he has done so quite successfully because we've only found these two small blood stains. We examined many other items from that individual and didn't find anything on them. And he's obviously done a good job of covering his tracks, but these minute traces left in these difficult to locate areas is what indicated that he was the perpetrator.
Wai Hong Sang is charged with the murder of his ex-wife, Mingzi Yang.
The police have circumstantial evidence. They have Wai Sang in Lincoln, in the area at the time of the murder. They have the forensic evidence that links him as well. What they haven't got is a specific motive or a reason why he's committed this awful attack on his ex-wife.
Police obviously believed they had their man, but now they had to prove a motive. Why had Mr. Sang chosen to kill his ex-wife?
33-year-old Wai Hong Sang has been charged with the murder of his ex-wife, 29-year-old Mingzi Yang, in the Sinsilbank area of Lincoln. Having pleaded not guilty, the case is sent for trial.
Mr. Sang's trial was heard at Lincoln Crown Court, which is a very old courtroom in the grounds of Lincoln Castle. It is all a wood panel building. The judge sits high above the courtroom in a wooden seat. The defendant sits opposite in the dock, and witnesses give evidence to his right. It is a very personal experience for everybody in the room.
As any officer involved in a murder case, you always will feel an amount of apprehension before a murder trial, because no matter how strong the case appears to be, and no matter how happy you are with how the investigation has gathered pace and been concluded at that point, there's always an opportunity and a chance that something could come up during the trial that could change the direction of things. And even if it is a technicality or something that doesn't directly impinge on the actual case itself, sometimes that can be something that influences a jury in a kind of negative way.
As the trial begins, local reporter Richard Van Plu observes Mingzi's alleged killer in the courtroom.
Sang was very composed. He was obviously a very intelligent man and was following the proceedings intently, but showed little emotion.
The prosecution opens their case against Sang.
The prosecution presented a strong case, backed by the CCTV evidence and the sat-nav evidence, but it wasn't an overwhelming case.
The prosecution in the case were looking to show that there was a degree of pre-planning and preparation in this case, the way that Wai Sang had behaved, the fact that he'd lied about where he'd been, that he came to Lincoln in his vehicle, then came on his pedal cycle into the city centre. The fact that there were so many injuries inflicted on Mingzi Yang, it was clearly a personal attack, and it was clearly something that he'd planned, and he'd tried to cover his tracks very carefully.
The pathology evidence presented at trial showed that the injury that most likely killed Mingzi was a brutal wound to the head. But the murder weapon was never recovered, and the prosecution suggested that this meant it was carried out by somebody with premeditation who had taken that weapon away and made sure that it wasn't found.
To the courtroom's surprise, Tsang agrees to give evidence.
As a journalist in the courtroom, you sit in a wood-panelled seat right next to the witness box where Mr. Tsang gave evidence. And confronted by the evidence from the sat-nav, Tsang gave an account that he did leave his car in the lay-by near Lincoln. This differed from the account that he initially gave the police.
Tsang agrees that yes, he did go to Lincoln, but rather than going into Lincoln City on a push bike, he said that he drove to the outskirts of Lincoln, he parked in a lay-by, and he slept for a couple of hours.
And the reason he gave for not telling the police this during his first account was that he didn't want his new partner to find out that he'd been sleeping.
The prosecution confronts Tsang with the CCTV footage from the day of the murder. They are convinced this is Tsang heading towards Sinsel Bank.
Tsang was adamant that the cyclist in the blue work helmet was not him, and that he remained in his car asleep on the outskirts of Lincoln.
Wei Tsang denies being the person on the pedal cycle. He simply says it's not him.
Despite the overwhelming forensic evidence against Tsang, the court are yet to hear a motive behind the killing. But then, details of Mingzi and Tsang's marriage are revealed to the jury.
It's revealed that there was a history of coercion and abuse from Wei Tsang against Mingzi Yang. It's been going on for some time before they actually divorced. Domestic abuse is very rarely isolated. It's something that will often go on perhaps for years. I read a statistic recently that said that there were 50 incidents of domestic abuse that would normally occur before someone calls for help. And the victim will often put up with abuse or coercion for a long period of time before they eventually come to the point where they actually ask for help. Mingzi Yang had actually reported previous incidents of domestic abuse to Humberside Police on 3 separate occasions before she moved to Lincoln, and actually before Darren Grundy had come onto the scene.
In 2012, Mingzi divorced from Tsang and moved to Lincoln to start a new life for herself. The pair then only saw each other when handing over their son to one another as part of an arrangement made by the court. The abuse that she had suffered appeared to have ended. But then, relations with her former husband took a sudden drop.
During the trial, it was established that the divorce between Mingzi and Tsang had not been straightforward. There had been some disagreements over the custody of their son. And obviously, that is something that can raise very high emotions.
Mingzi and Tsang had initially settled on shared custody of their son. But in the lead-up to that fateful morning, it appears Mingzi had put in motion plans to end this.
They shared custody, but the prosecution put the motive on the basis that he got a letter a few days before where she wanted more custody of their son.
Wei Tsang had received at least one letter in relation to those custody arrangements, so it's believed that actually Mingzi Yang was looking to see more of her son, and Wei Tsang wasn't happy with that, and this potentially was the reason why he killed her. In my experience, in a case involving children and personal relationships, it can be something on the face of it quite simple, and in isolation perhaps not as serious, that can send somebody over the edge. Could potentially be a build-up of tension and stress over a period of time, and the person just kind of snaps.
In January 2015, the jury at Lincoln Crown Court returns its verdict. Wei Hong Tsang is found guilty of Mingzi Yang's murder. He is sentenced to a minimum of 28 years in prison.
At the end of the trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict on the charge of murder. They were obviously convinced by the prosecution case and returned an extremely quick verdict for a murder case. They took just 2 hours to find Tsang guilty.
Wai Sang, I would say, was a cold-hearted individual, self-centred, deceitful and clearly very violent.
But with his cleverly constructed alibi, initially deceiving police, was there a chance that Tsang could have walked away with murder?
This case stands out because the murderer prepared a very clever alibi before carrying out the killing. It is not unusual for people to try and create an alibi after they carry out a murder or a killing. But in my career as a crime reporter, there are probably only 2 or 3 other cases where someone has gone to such great lengths.
He's sat down and thought this through. He's obviously an intelligent person. He's covered his tracks. It just tells me that, yeah, he is that kind of cold, calculated kind of a person.
If it wasn't for the blood on the bike and the watch, although he is on the outskirts of Lincoln, it's not beyond reasonable doubt that a jury could have been convinced that he wasn't a cyclist.
The case really turned on the forensic evidence. You know, he may well have got away with that murder in years gone by, but fortunately with the advances in forensic science and the specialist CCTV that's available and the experts nowadays, he was quite rightly tracked down and sentenced.
If this murder had happened 30 years ago, at the start of my career, it's probably quite unlikely that he would have been convicted.
You could surmise that she'd been strangled or that the cord had actually caused her death.
A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know?
I live every day with the fact that I was friends with a murderer.
At the edge of London lies the village-like suburb of Kew.
Kew is one of the most sought-after areas of London. It's in West London.
Kew is an extremely wealthy area. It's within commuting distance of the City of London, and it's wonderful nature beside the river and the Royal Botanic Gardens.
It's very leafy. It's a very well-to-do kind of area. It's fairly low crime as well. So it's a nice area for people to live in.
There is definitely a villagey feel. We have a very small high street. You will find a lot of independent trades around Kew, which I think that's what people like.
There's a lot of artists and TV celebrities, and of course Sir David Attenborough lives there. It's a world-class site.
Kew was the perfect place for aspiring French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Berteau to set up home in 2009.
Laureline was my best friend, my close friend. She was like a sister to me. We always be united. We always be in touch. We just developed a friendship, more than a friendship. Our children called her Auntie Lolo, and my daughter has her name. She was family.
She was a vivacious, very popular, well-liked young woman who was beautiful on the inside as well as on the outside. She was easy to like and was a very caring and considerate kind of person.
The future seemed bright for Laureline, and London was the place to help make her career ambitions come true.
She was born in Aix-en-Provence, but she came to London to pursue her dream of becoming a film producer.
Laureline had a lot of passion, but she developed a real passion for cinema. She was a passionate people. She was a determined people. She was a hard worker. She started her own production company. She got a Grammy as a production assistant on a movie with Dame Joan Collins. For us, it was nice and amazing, but I know for England was a dream, and it was a dream.
Despite a successful career, Laureline was happiest at home with her dogs.
Laureline was a dog lover. She loves animals. She had an Instagram of a video every day with her 2 dogs, Haley, a husky, and Blake, a Rottweiler. Okay, so nice. They sleep on the bed, and we see that on Instagram every day. It's like they're her children for her.
And on top of her busy life in the UK, Laureline stayed in regular contact with her family in France.
Laureline was very close to her family. Oh yes, she used to call her mom every day and maybe twice a day, on the morning and the evening. So the family for Laureline is everything. Family and friends and pets was everything.
In March 2019, Laureline was due to move out of her flat in Kew into a new place. Something friends and family were eagerly waiting to hear about.
On Sunday, she didn't answer us, neither on Monday, and it was already strange.
Certainly raised alarm bells the fact that Laureline had not spoken to her best friend and her mum and her family, when she would normally speak to her mum every day and speak to her best friend very regularly as well. So the only communication that they had seemingly from her was by text message.
But there was something unusual about Laureline's texts.
Her friends had received some strange text messages from her that didn't really chime with the kind of person that they knew her to be. For example, her best friend said that she thought it was strange that she said that she was going on a shopping spree in Oxford Street because she knew that she usually shopped online and got all her clothes from online retailers. She'd described how she was looking forward to getting a boob job and liposuction. Certainly not the kind of thing that she would have said. So this kind of thing immediately raised alarms, and they were very, very concerned that she just seemed to be communicating by text message, but nobody had seen her.
Confused by Laureline's strange behaviour, her sister-in-law makes her way to the property in Kew.
And when she couldn't find her, she alerted the police.
Laureline was reported missing on the 6th of March 2019, and that means that a police officer would be dispatched to talk to her about her concerns and take a report. The missing persons inquiry started with questions to her sister-in-law and potentially any friends that could be found to say, have you seen her? Can you tell us when you last saw her? And the concern was raised because her sister-in-law had visited the address and she could hear dogs barking, Laureline's dogs, and no sign of Laureline. Laureline was a lover of dogs, so she would never leave her dogs alone. They were her children, essentially, at the time. And also, because it was now Tuesday, Laureline had failed to turn up for work, so work colleagues were now concerned. So you had a lot of people voicing their concern about where Laureline was, and that made it a concern for the police because this was completely out of character and completely unusual behaviour.
Police begin their inquiries by also visiting Laureline's address.
In a missing persons inquiry, police will attend an address, the place where the person lives, because within that premises you might find something to indicate where they've gone. It might be a ticket, it might be a receipt, it could be anything. And also you want to make sure that they haven't come to harm behind locked doors. So there would be a natural instinct for officers to get into that premises, and quite often that's by breaking in to check on the welfare of somebody, and that's what they did in this case. The officers went in, searched the premises, and she was not anywhere. But what officers could see inside that address was the boxes all still ready to be packed.
It looked as if she was just about to move out. Her belongings were all boxed up, ready as if she was about to move out of the flat straight away. So it looked like the home had been disrupted in some way.
Back at the police station, officers assess the risk of Laureline's disappearance.
A missing person is graded low, medium, or high risk, and different things happen at different levels. In the low risk, you've got people who perhaps there's no particular harm, but you can think they might just have gone away, and the concern is quite a low for them. Medium risk, slightly more work is done around that because people are concerned, but it might be within their character to go away for a weekend or something like that. So it's not necessarily out of character. Whereas you have the high risk category, and that's where Laureline sat, because this was completely out of character.
After reviewing the case as high risk, police returned to Laureline's address for a more detailed search.
They went out into the garden using torches. And in the garden, they had a look around and they could see various items leaning up against a fence, so a spade, shovel, other items that you would use in general gardening, and a bag of compost as well on the right-hand fence. And one of the officers then turned attention to the flower bed on the left-hand side as you walked into the garden and noticed that it was completely brand new in one section. The CID officer moved the soil back closest to them and identified what they thought was the shape of a foot sticking out in essentially a shallow grave. And just a few more scrapes to see what was there made them believe that what they had found was indeed a body.
Searching for missing French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Berteau have discovered a body buried in her back garden.
As soon as you find a body in a shallow grave in a premises, it becomes a murder inquiry straight away because that person doesn't put themselves there. And that's when the process of the team start to make their own inquiries, and all the different actions that come out of that initial deployment begin in earnest.
With a murder investigation in progress, police secure the scene.
We had a lot of this area all cordoned off, a lot of crime scene tents here, because as you bring items out of the garden as well, you need to put them somewhere which is forensically sterile. And so we tried to utilise the area out the back of the premises for that reason. So here really behind the house, the alleyway that we used, and trying to set up a forensic retrieval here was quite difficult because the wind was so strong that it was hard. And obviously knowing how detailed you've got to be and how, to avoid any contamination because it is windy, and also you're dealing with an outside scene, it's particularly more complex than you would expect an inner scene to be.
Arrive on scene, having been called by the homicide assessment team, usually, and we'll receive a briefing from the local borough police about what the incident involves and why it may be suspicious. Once we've had a briefing, we're wearing protective clothing, mask, overshoes, gloves, scene suit, and entering the scene to look for to see what has occurred.
The crime scene manager is in charge of that scene forensically, whether they be physical exhibits that are taken out of a premises or whether they are swabs or fingerprints. They're in charge of running that scene.
The recovery of the body is totally down to the archaeologist, and he'll work in tandem with an anthropologist. Their speciality is bone analysis, who died, how they died and where they died. Working together, they can rapidly maximise the recording, interpretation and recovery of the body.
As the team removes several inches of soil, it becomes clear that the individual is in fact female.
Obviously, your first thought is, well, Laureline Garcia Bartu is missing, and we have a body in the garden, and it's suspicious that she's missing. So, obviously, my thought is straight away, well, this is probably going to be Laureline. But you don't go to a family with probablys. You have to be sure.
As forensic archaeologists continue digging, the level of brutality on the victim becomes clear.
Once the body was removed from the ground, she was lying on her back, naked. She was wrapped in a mattress, and there was silver duct tape around the area of where the knees and the neck were. The mattress was then wrapped in a cord around the middle of it, but around her neck she had an electric wire. She had a head bag on, and her arms were tied behind her back with duct tape. You could surmise that she'd been strangled, or the cord had actually caused her death. You couldn't see the rest of the body to determine what else was there. She may have been stabbed for all we knew, but that wouldn't be able to be looked at until we got to the mortuary.
As the body is taken to the mortuary to establish a cause of death and identify the victim, news of a murder spreads.
For a young woman's body to be dug up in a garden in Kew, it would have been, almost unheard of in a neighbourhood like that. A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
I haven't ever heard of a murder in Kew.
It's quite shocking to hear a murder in Kew. It's not normally the norms of anything.
When details started to appear of what had happened, people become very concerned about, something that's happening in your neighbourhood. It causes a lot of concern, a lot of fear as well.
At the mortuary, the post-mortem gets underway.
Once the body arrives for the post-mortem, he would look at both sides of the body for any bruising, any wounds, anything that stands out to him. There was no obvious to be seen. Be checking the hyoid bone, the bone under the neck, see if it's fractured, and then it results in the conclusion that death had been compression of the neck, believed via strangulation.
With a cause of death established, it isn't long before the individual is identified as none other than Laureline Garcia Bartu.
I was in my car alone, and I just remember that it was Laureline's mother I hadn't phoned. So I just said the word, is it her? Is she dead? And I hung up. I remember I screamed. I never screamed like that. It's taken a part of me. She was like my little sister, It's taken a part of me.
The investigation into Laureline's murder ramps up and initial theories are considered. Could this be a burglary gone wrong?
It's a very attractive area for a burglar because there's a lot of assets there.
So if someone's forced their way into the address and killed somebody, and then that person has disappeared, we need to identify them as soon as we can. So we'll be looking to make a light source examination, any finger marks that are not seen to the naked eye. Fingerprint examination. We'll be looking for any DNA that we can find, possibly cigarette ends. Things have been moved by the suspect. He may have opened drawers, cupboards, so we'll be looking to examine those, DNA. He may have cut himself somewhere, so he may have drops of blood that he's left behind.
But a closer examination begins to cast doubts on a suspected burglary.
If it had been a burglary gone wrong, you wouldn't expect them to hang around and attempt to hide the body in the way that it had been.
Police take into consideration Laureline's plans to move home around the time of her murder.
Could the movers have been involved? Could it have been a handyman that had, come round and helped box up her belongings?
After making their inquiries, police discover that no removal firm had attended the address. So focus switches to Laureline's personal life.
Certainly from her communication with her friends, it was suggested that when she'd last spoken to her sister-in-law, she was looking forward to going on a date with a vet that she'd met. But it was very unclear whether that date had actually taken place or who he was, even. There was very little information given. Who had she been talking to online, on dating apps? Maybe she met somebody else. That was certainly something that could be unravelled through looking into her mobile phone and computer.
Police decide to try to look into Laureline's last movements to see if they hold any clues.
You look at things like Laureline's finance, so where has she spent money, which indicates that she might have been to a certain place, like a restaurant, which we found out on Friday the 1st, she'd been to a restaurant, and then that venue itself has CCTV.
The CCTV shows Laureline dining with a man, with the pair holding hands. And inquiries with those closest to Laureline soon identifies him.
Laureline was in an on-off relationship for quite a number of years with a man called Kirill Belarusov. And this relationship had been going on for 8+ years, but had kind of fizzled out a couple of years beforehand, but they still saw each other on and off. And so they were aware that Kirill was in the UK as an Estonian national, in the UK to come and help her move that weekend.
Police continue to scour CCTV around the area. Both are later seen on bus CCTV, heading in the direction towards Laureline's home in Kew. It seems Kirill may have been one of the last people to see Laureline alive. But when police try to locate him, they find they are too late.
They had discovered that Kirill was actually no longer in the UK. He had flown to Tallinn in Estonia.
Belarusov has left the country.
Police investigating the murder of Laureline Garcia Berteau want to speak to her ex-lover, Kirill Belarusov, as he may have been one of the last people to see her. But police discover that he has left the country.
The CID officers got in contact with Kirill Belarusov via a telephone number they had for him, which was given to them by the family. And they made contact straight away. He behaved like he didn't know what had happened, and the last time he saw her, she was alive.
Kirill tells police he was helping Laureline move on the Saturday, before she left Kew to move to a new address. But when asked further about this last encounter with Laureline, he doesn't give clear answers.
He was being obstructive, in our opinion. He kept avoiding the question. I wanted him back in the country because I wanted to speak to him face to face, but he kept making excuses why he wasn't coming back, or saying, yes, I'm just going to sort it out, and then nothing would happen. He could do everything he could to come back. He was saying he'd be back on one day, that day would go past, we'd ring him and he'd say, I couldn't make it, I'm going to do another day. And this just kept pushing back and pushing back. And you get to a point where you think, well, that's enough. I know he's trying to avoid him coming back.
I think the fact that Belarusov is not keen to help the police in their inquiries, considering that Laureline had been his partner for the best part of 10 years, is extremely suspicious. And the fact that he left the country around the time of her disappearance as well would have raised alarm bells.
Kirill Belarusov soon became the #1 suspect in the inquiry.
But with Kirill refusing to come back, police need to apply for an extradition order.
The police have a fairly complicated process to get someone back from another country. The British police can apply for a European arrest warrant, which is what they did. So they applied to get Belarusov back from Estonia, where he was at the time.
But for the Crown Prosecution Service to agree, the police need to prove they have enough of a case against Kirill.
When you get a European arrest warrant, as this was, when you bring them back into the country, you have no power to interview them. So you have to do everything without asking them a question, which is very, very difficult because you're not giving, firstly, someone the ability to explain, but also you have to reach that threshold of evidence, which means that as soon as they set foot back in this country, you can charge them straight away with the murder.
With police needing to build a firm case against Kirill, they start to dig into his life.
I met Kirill whilst working in a nightclub. It was called Egg, and we started working together, and that's how we met. Kirill was very charming, he was very nice. He was not, arrogant or trying to tell his side of the story. He was always waiting for you to ask a question before bragging or saying anything. Kirill told me about Laureline when we met. He didn't say her name, but he mentioned that he had an ex-girlfriend that he was really in love with, and that they broke up.
But Sabrina recalls how Kirill later spoke in more detail about his and Laureline's relationship and claimed she had cheated on him.
He mentioned that he'd had cancer before and that he couldn't have babies anymore, and that one time his ex fell pregnant and she didn't know that he couldn't have babies, and that's how he found out that she cheated, and that's how the relationship ended. He would always say that it was his fault and that she was very caring and that it was hard on her, the fact that he had cancer. So he wasn't blaming her, but he was saying that's how they ended it.
Sabrina remembers the last time she saw Kirill before he left the UK for his home country of Estonia.
The last time I saw Kirill, he told me before that he was going to die, that his cancer was terminal, and that was the last time I was ever going to see him. He said he sold his house, I'm about to die, let's go dinner. And I went to that restaurant crying. I cried most of the night saying, I'm going to lose my friend.
With police still unable to question Kirill to see if his account of his illness is true, they turn to Laureline's finances to try to establish her whereabouts the weekend of her murder.
Through continued interrogation of finances, we see that on Saturday, round about 10:15 in the morning, that there are transactions in Pets at Home and Sainsbury's, all local to where Laureline lived. So again, officers are there as quickly as possible to identify CCTV opportunities. And there you see Kirill Belarusov with Laureline again. So now we know he's with her in the morning.
At a glance, all appears to be fine. But when police look at Laureline's finances a day later on the Sunday, there appears to be no sign of any purchases. Instead, they look into Kirill's finances.
So we start to look at transactions that Kirill might have made as well. And what you could see on Sunday, the 3rd of March, was Kirill had left premises and had gone to a local retail park, similar to where Laureline and he had been the day before. He'd been to Sainsbury's, been to Homebase, and been to convenience stores through that morning, and was purchasing items which were highly suspicious. They were the rubble sacks that matched the rubble sacks that were found on Laureline's body. He had purchased an axe, which we never found, and he had purchased soil, or compost as it was. And you could see the CCTV of him, identifying him clearly as the person purchasing those items. And so you could say straight away then that it's very, very clear what he was up to. That was now that Laureline had been killed, and he was thinking of ways to dispose of her body.
With Kirill's behaviour raising suspicions, police approached the CPS.
We had to go to the Crown Prosecution Service and prove what we had, using all of the information we had: CCTV, finance, witness statements, the crime scene itself, the condition of Laureline's body, and that was something which is very, very difficult, but we were able to prove at that point that we had enough evidence to secure an arrest of Kirill Belarusov. And that gives you the ability to get a European arrest warrant and bring them back. He was brought back on the 20th of March and charged with the murder of Laureline. Kirill Belarusov will go to court the following day, to a magistrate's court, where, because it's murder, they send it to the Crown Court, and then he's due to enter a plea some 8 weeks later. And that plea is not guilty. So we knew at that point we are going to trial with him at some stage in 2019.
And as the case is prepared for trial, potential witnesses are called in by the police and prosecution.
The police called me saying, "We want to talk to you about your friend Kirill," and I thought they were calling me to say that he was dead. They told me he's been arrested, he's killed someone. I was in shock. I was like, "Are you sure that it is the right person?" And they said, "Yes." You don't murder, you don't think that you knew a murderer?
His ex-partner, Laureline Garcia-Berteau. The trial begins at the Old Bailey in London, and the prosecution open their case against Kirill with DNA evidence from the crime scene.
The flex that was used to tie Laureline's hands behind her back, you could see that flex on the floor in the living room where it had been cut, and indeed the forensic testing showed that Kirill Belarusov's DNA was at the cut part of that flex.
The jury hears of the early relationship between Laureline and Kirill.
At the beginning, she called him my Superman. He's tall, very helpful, especially with women, you know. He came to spend a few days with Laureline at my home. He ate at my parents' table. He was a Superman, a good boy.
And Kirill had even boasted of his career achievements to Laureline.
He had told people he was a stuntman and that he'd worked on films with famous people like Brad Pitt, and that he was training people. We searched in the industries at Hollywood, and we searched in the UK, IMDb, to see where was he in these films, and they're always shown if you work on there. He was nowhere to be found. These were all complete and utter lies that he told everybody.
But the lies did not stop there.
He began to say to lots of people that he was sick and that he had 10 years left to live.
He didn't talk much about his cancer. You would ask him a question and he would say, "I'm bleeding from every hole. I've been puking for the last 3 days." I think it's just once where I said, "If you don't mind me asking, what is the cancer? Where is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's the pancreas, it's the liver area." And then the time after, he would be like, "Oh, it's spread everywhere." But he would never give any more details. He'd just say, "I'm a guinea pig. They've opened me up and stitched me. They keep on opening me up." But he wasn't very specific.
Laureline's mother, friend, and I found it very strange because he has nothing in front of us. When we saw Kirill, my wedding day, or for a holiday, we can't imagine he's sick.
I've never known someone who had cancer. So when I saw him with a shaved head, I didn't question it. I didn't think he still had eyebrows. And I didn't know that you lose your eyebrows when you have chemo.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know? We were suspicious. We tell that to Laureline. We explained to her to open her eyes, but she was in love.
And we were discovering that almost all of his entire life that he told people about was a complete lie. Saying you've got cancer when you don't have, for me, is the lowest of the low.
The prosecution also reveals to the court more about Kirill's double life.
Every time he suggested he was going in for treatment to a hospital in London or just outside of London, what he was actually doing was going to stay with another girlfriend in London. That girlfriend also was told the same lie by him, that he had cancer. So when he was not with her and saying that he was away for a few days, he was going to stay with Laureline.
It's only when I sat down in court that I realised that he was texting the three of us at the same time, his girlfriend, Laureline and me. So it was really like juggling between the three of us. With me, he was supposed to be in Russia having treatment, and then he was actually in London seeing Laureline, talking to Laureline. I felt like a fool. I felt so stupid. It was so shocking.
The prosecution described that as Laureline's film career began to take off, Kirill may have looked towards her with envy.
He wanted a career in films as well, to a certain extent. He wanted to be a stuntman, but he wasn't, and he couldn't have been because he didn't have the skills to do that. His only skill was lying, whereas she was genuinely talented, and she was very, very hardworking, and she was prepared to earn her place in her chosen career. So I think there probably was an element of jealousy in the relationship.
But it's details of a debt owed to Laureline which could point towards a motive for murder.
She had given him so much money over the course of their relationship, and we knew you were talking plus £17,000 at least at that point. And that was getting to the point where he had to pay that money back. In November 2018, Laureline had sent a message to Kirill, and this was saying, you don't realise how much in debt, how much in trouble I am. I can't pay my rent. You need to pay me the money back. And from friends and family, we would always hear stories where he would promise this money. It's coming, I've got this job, this stuntman job, whatever it might be, which was all lies. So he knew he could never pay that back. That could be one motive. Secondly, she was at that point in her life now where she was ready to move on, away from him. And she was effectively a source of income for him as well. And that was about to dry up.
To the court's surprise, Kirill gives evidence.
I think the most shocking about the trial was himself. He took the stand and spoke, and it was just, I think it lasted 2 days, and it was 2 days of horror. Every word that was coming out of his mouth was horrible. The way he talked about me, the way he talked about Laureline, the way he saw himself, the arrogance in his voice. I remember sitting down terrified because I had been so close to him and just thinking, that man is a monster. It was traumatizing.
I always think about the people over the years that have been in front of you in a trial, and he's probably right up there as the most evil-looking eyes I think I've ever seen. And because behind it you can see that he really doesn't care. You know, his image and what he's portrayed himself as is more important than anything else. And he was really, really unpleasant and arrogant beyond belief during the entire 4-week trial at the Old Bailey.
The court hears how in March 2019, Laureline begged Kirill one last time to pay back what was owed to her. But instead, he used this opportunity to kill Laureline.
You have the timeline of them going out on the Friday night, which we can see. We have the timeline of them going shopping on Saturday morning. She had booked a removal company ready for Saturday, but she didn't know where she was moving to because Kirill Belarusov had said he has found somewhere for her to move to. She had no money because he owed her a lot of money. She kept asking him, where am I going? And you could see that through telephone contact. Well, where is this address? I need to tell my removal company where we're going. And so the removal company basically said, well, I can't move you to nowhere. So it was all cancelled. Kirill Belarusov comes up with a new lie. This is, he's organised a removal company for her.
But the removal company never came.
And you get to the point then where Laureline is panicking because she doesn't know where she's going, and she's clearly getting to that point in the evening where on that Saturday she's starting to disbelieve what he's saying. And that's when everything goes quiet.
It's at this point that Kirill strangled Laureline with a cord. And the following morning, he was seen in local shops purchasing suspicious items.
Kirill had been out and bought these items on the Sunday morning, which were used to cover the body of Laureline.
After returning to Laureline's home to bury her body, Kirill used her phone to send fake texts to Laureline's friends and family to buy some time.
He foolishly used Google Translate to try and reply to the family members in French, and obviously it's not going to sound very credible. It's not going to sound like Laureline, not the words that she would use, and the translation was extremely clunky, so it was immediately quite suspicious.
And at the time that those messages were being sent, he was using the Wi-Fi of the address itself. So that puts him inside the address using her phone, sickeningly looking at pornography at the same time he's sending these messages, knowing full well that in that house is Laureline's body. And that really shows you what kind of person he is. It's very difficult to comprehend a person who has that kind of personality, that very strange and almost psychotic personality.
By the time concerned family and friends of Laureline get in touch with Kirill about her disappearance, he's leaving the country for Estonia.
I put my phone with video with him. I saw that he was in the airport. So I asked him, you are in the airport and your lovely Laureline is missing. Why are you leaving? There's no explanation, but he leaves.
After a grueling trial at the Old Bailey, the jury returns its verdict. Kirill Belarusov is found guilty of murder and is sentenced to 24 years in prison.
Tiến hôm qua đi của đéo tự đi đôi về. Thằng Nột luôn nào khi cổ đông mà đổi gái trước mà nó không đổi thì nó 3.700 thì kéo. Nó hiện cuối tháng trước rồi. Anh nhìn nào trên đấy thì anh nhìn vẫn là thấy nó nào phụ rồi. Thế là Anh nhìn thấy con gà đấy thì nằm rồi, cái này không đổ. Đây, nó bóng đá đây, football. Ôi gá chắc luôn là không biết, đéo biết. Và mặt bố đéo ai Tâm, không phải Vân đâu, bạn Biên thì phải Tâm Hoài. Tâm. Thế thì không đổi gà thì gà về gà mình. Thế đi làm thì chết. Nhiều thời quá nó quên. Thế đi làm thế thôi, thì cũng vậy. Thế thôi. Đấy, 307 bị ai ngoằn. Đi trẻ. Chịu thật. Làm xong không đổi gà. Con gà này phải lấy gì? Nó nếu mà tính ra nó phải làm mấy tháng rồi, nó làm tháng trước không chứ nữa. Không phải tháng vừa giờ đâu, cái kiểu nó phải vậy. Thế nó đổi chưa? Đây, thế là xong đợt đấy nó mới đổi tiếp. Xong đợt đấy bắt đầu mới đổi. Thế nó mất rồi. Còn quỷ ngay. Cái đấy thì nó cũng ấy mà. Hả? Đấy nó lấy còn đâu thì nó về đâu. Nhưng mà nó có biết là nó có đổi gà đâu. Hả? Cái con gà mình đổi từ thời đầu năm rồi mà. Nó nào nó không đổi bạn. Cái này phải xác định mất đi. Nhưng đó là sao nó biết đấy là con gà của Đông được? Mà bản thân Đông không biết đấy là con gà của Đông. Đúng không? Đi nó tháng đấy là được 2.500. Nó phải trả giá đúng không? Nó trả giá là cái của nó. Thì nó có biết không nhưng mà tôi kệ. 3.700, 3.770. Phải có tiền thì đá bóng chứ. Biết chẳng hạn. Chị này đi tôi làm vậy đi. Đây. Tính ra đá bóng đánh biết ngang nhau đấy nha. Không, biết nhiều hơn thì là nhiều rồi. Biết tiền sân tầm đá bóng tiền nước nó rẻ hơn. Thế cũng tầm đấy có 800 đến 200 triệu thì tiền nước đấy nó rẻ. Tiền nước có biết ở sân Bích ông 300-400 và 300-400 hôm 1-500. Tiền sân 700 là cũng 1.1 triệu, kia 1.050.000 ngang nhau. Đi sân ở kia 3 tiếng mới là 700 à? Sân 7 3 tiếng như 750. 6 triệu đấy. Hình như thế. Phải hết đá 9 rồi mà. Đúng không? Vâng. 6 triệu hết một tháng, 2 tháng thì tích cũng kể ra có 3 triệu một tháng. Điên lại đi ở rồi. Không có ăn gì phải đi ở lắm. Sáng làm bếp bún lòng, ăn cháo lòng. Hôm nay anh làm bát cháo lòng. Anh mà đi đâu cũng chỉ ăn quanh những món anh ăn rồi, đâu được đâu. Sáng ăn rất là ngon nhỉ, gọi cháu. Ăn đi em, ngon lắm. Ăn đi. Ok anh ơi. Quá rồi, ok anh mua hộ bác. Mày vào xem một dương mà thở. Còn sáng rồi dậy đi ăn sớm á. Đang cũng khoe uống liệu trình của ông Mạnh rồi. Để kể có cà phê uống nhỉ? Mua. Cậu uống cà phê đấy, đủ cà phê. Chưa biết mua rồi. Hả? Chưa. Anthony thì kẻ chuyên lấy cùng nguồn, cùng tên, cùng sâu.